Welcome to #Wednesdays Weekly, a weekly information session in collaboration with voluntary sector and public sector partners. Thank you for joining us for week 3 of the virtual facilitation toolkit, and this week the session will be on breakout rooms. The host for today is Maddie Hubbard from Action Together. Over to you, Maddie.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming back for week 3. It's good to see lots of familiar faces. Today we are going to cover, this one's a little bit more kind of facilitation heavy rather than the particular tool. So it's ways that we can use breakout rooms, a tool that probably all of you have kind of experienced already, but to do some different kind of facilitation methods, I guess. That's got the wrong number on it. It's week 3 because we had a bit of a break last week. So Hayley, if we just go on to the next slide. I'm going to kind of talk about a couple of different facilitation methods that you can do using breakout rooms, kind of how you might use them, when to use them, and then there'll be time for questions. And just to say, we're not going to talk about the kind of technical, like the way you actually set up a breakout room, but what we will do is send round some good explainer videos afterwards, so you can kind of see how that side of it works, because that's quite hard to do in this session, because if you share screen, the breakout room thing doesn't pop up, so we can't show you us actually doing it. And also to say that what my frame of reference to this is using Zoom. It is possible to do kind of breakout rooms on Teams, but it's much clunkier. So if anyone isn't allowed to use Zoom at work, let me know and I can find some explainers online about using Teams. But if you can, Zoom is there for this kind of thing. So thanks, Hayley. If we just go on to the next slide. So as we tend to, we're going to send you to breakout rooms just for introductions. And each week we kind of think of a question to help you think of your own experience of this stuff, which helps you then as the facilitator understand what it feels like to be part of a session that uses the tool or the method or the problem that we're trying to solve. So today, if you just do introductions in your breakout rooms and also share a bit of your experiences of workshops and events you've been to over the past year where they've been used. So the kind of the good, the bad, the ugly, all the different ways that it's helpful or frustrating. So Hayley, are you happy to send people off and I'll pause recording?
Okay, drum kit there, Julie.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome back. If anyone's got any thoughts they want to put in the chat, I'd be interested to hear anything that you spoke about. Oh, and if you could all mute yourself now that you're back, just so we don't get an echo or anything. Talking about breakout rooms, the way that they're really useful is they replicate some of the ways that we use space at events, being able to help people collaborate in smaller groups, being able to break up sessions and make them more interesting. But there are differences from kind of when we're in person that I guess we've all started to figure out over the past year, but I just wanted to kind of chat about those a little bit before we go into the methods. So in terms of how you design your session, I think the universal experience of breakout rooms is they're not long enough. They're too short. You get pulled out just when you get to the good bit of the conversation. I think that's because when people get to them, it takes just a little bit of time to warm up to the group. And then once you really get into it, it just takes longer than it would in person to start having a good conversation. So in terms of design, always give people longer than you think for them. With participants and who's there, I think breakout rooms are a really great way to get people engaged. So if you're starting an event and loads of people with their cameras off, maybe looking at their emails, and then you send them to a breakout room, suddenly they kind of wake up a little bit, it engages your brain, you kind of feel a bit responsible to the other couple of people in your room and you start participating in the session. And there's a quote that I always think about when I'm designing a session. It's that you've not arrived until you've spoken. And it's that the earlier in a session, you can get everyone in the room having said something. So they've broken that barrier almost of unmuting, speaking to everyone else, kind of feeling part of what's going on, the better. And that's a way to help people get engaged. And then my final thought was about accessibility. And I'd be interested if anyone else has any thoughts about potential barriers and challenges caused by breakout rooms. So things I was thinking about is potentially things like social anxiety, if that's a tricky thing for someone to be sent off into a really small room and expected to talk, if that's not, they don't feel comfortable to. Tech barriers people might face of understanding how to get to the other room, or if you're joining on your phone, that can be a tricky thing to do. But if anyone else has found any kind of access considerations around breakout rooms, I'd be really interested to hear about it. So on to the session. So we're talking about breakout rooms, and today we're going to think about three different, so it's 2 slides after this one, Hayley, sorry. Thank you, perfect. I'm going to talk about 3 different ways you can use breakout rooms for different purposes. So all of these work regardless of the size of your event. However many people you have, you can do all of these methods, but you'd use them for different purposes depending on kind of what the group needs, what the outcomes you need are. So the first we can talk about is from time to think. That's their approach. And this one is really great for helping people be more creative and potentially breaking up power dynamics in a room. If there's some people that are really comfortable speaking and taking up lots of space, and there's other people that don't get heard as much. The next one we're going to do is a liberating structures method, which is really helpful for generating ideas from a large group, helping groups reach consensus, and also for decision making. And then the final one is World Cafe. So this can be really great for networking and connecting people, or for helping large groups have discussions. So hey, if you go on to the next slide, I'm going to start with the time to think method. So Time to Think is a book that I really rate. I think it says some really useful things. And one of their key building blocks is called thinking pairs. So this is about giving people guaranteed, uninterrupted attention. It's about that time, giving people time in a way that you almost never have, where you just get to speak and be heard. And I found it's incredibly useful to help people really process what they think about something before you go into a discussion. It just massively increases the quality of people's thinking and their creativity by having that uninterrupted space to think before you bring people back together. So in practice, what it looks like is you send people into breakout rooms in pairs, and they have 2 minutes each. So it's 2 minutes for one person to speak with no interruptions, no questions, nothing. The other person is just there to focus on the quality of their listening and really pay close attention. And then you send a message out, broadcast message out, and they swap over, and the other person gets 2 minutes. And then you bring everyone back. So in practice, it's an incredibly simple method, though actually people find it quite challenging to just speak for that long, or to just listen for that long. It's not something we're used to doing, and there's always groups that kind of ignore the instruction and just chat to each other because that feels more comfortable. So Nancy Klein, who wrote Time to Think, would say that interruption is an act of violence. And whether or not you kind of agree with that, I think it's a really powerful thing to offer, is the opportunity just to listen and be heard as part of your sessions. So I thought it'd be interesting to try it out so you can see what it feels like to do that. So the question we're gonna do today is, what's your experience of power dynamics in virtual meetings? And that you could take that and kind of the question in any way that you want. And what we're going to do is send you to breakout rooms and decide which one of you is going to go first. And we'll time for 2 minutes and then send a broadcast message and you'll swap over. So Hayley, are you happy to open all the rooms now? Reflections on doing that, how did you find it?
I think this is very good exercise. When we were just talking before, when you're delivering training, and some people speak more than others. Some people are more outspoken. Some people are shy, or and I think this is great exercise because give people a chance to talk. Because it's very difficult as a trainer to moderate, because you're not in a room with them, like if you are in a training session. When you're in a training session, you can moderate and you can kind of have some certain control on you to encourage people to speak or to ask others to give other people a chance, But in a breakout this way, I find very useful to kind of give everyone the opportunity to talk. I'm definitely going to use that myself.
Great.
It was your broadcast message, Maddie, Rich, we kind of saw popped up, but I had
a little pop-up of my own there, which showed the speaker thing, says HP and speaker. So I saw a blue thing come up, and I assumed it was your broadcast message, but didn't really see what it said.
Okay. That's helpful to know. So it's something about making it really clear for people when to switch, maybe saying what time on the clock it will be, as well as sending a broadcast message. You've got a few different ways to keep track of time.
Is there a way to make the broadcast message bigger or more visible?
I don't think so, but I tell you what, I'll add it to my list of things that I'll do a bit of research and try and send around something useful afterwards.
Maybe it'd be good to have a sort of a voice, a disembodied voice coming into the room. Time's up.
I'm worried that would creep everyone out. Fab. Great. And there's some good comments in the chat as well. So the next method we're going to talk about is liberating structures. So liberating structures is a whole collection of facilitation methods that are freely available online, and they're useful for all sorts of different situations. And the one I want to talk about today is probably the one I use most often, which is 1, 2, 4, all. And it's really easy to transition into virtual facilitation with breakout rooms. So it can be done with unlimited numbers of people, and it gives everyone a chance to think and to contribute and to discuss on an equal basis. So it's really good for kind of democratizing a room. So in particular, it could be useful to gather questions or ideas in large meetings, or to just engage everyone in discussion at the same time. And we're just going to go through kind of step by step how you would do that in a virtual session. So the first stage of 1, 2, 4 all is the 1. So it's people thinking on their own, silent self-reflection. The way you can do this is just in the main room with everyone. You can invite people to keep their cameras on or turn them off if they feel more comfortable, and give them a minute for kind of silent self-reflection on a shared challenge or a question. So, you know, it could be, what opportunities do you see for making progress on this challenge? Or how would you handle this situation? What ideas or actions do you recommend? Whatever it is that helps you get towards the point of the session. And something that can be nice is getting people to actually use the physical space in front of them. So get them to have a piece of paper to write or sketch their ideas on. So not everything is just on the screen in front of them. And it can feel strange for there to be silence on a Zoom call for a whole minute. It can feel almost a bit uncomfortable to just see people's faces and no one be talking. But it's really valuable to get people to start thinking of their own ideas before they get influenced by other ideas. Because I'm sure we've all been in a meeting where someone starts talking and then you go down a rabbit hole of that idea rather than everyone kind of sharing the different perspectives that they bring. So that's the first stage. The next stage is to send people in breakout rooms in pairs. And this is about comparing the ideas that you've had from your self-reflection and building on them. So you don't have to take it in turns to speak. It's just a discussion. Oh, Paul, I've just seen you got your hand up. Did you have a question you wanted to ask?
I was just wondering if that is, you know, if you feel it has to be done in that kind of Brady Bunch kind of screen way, or whether it would work, for example, to watch something and to put your feelings into the chat or your thoughts or your reflections. Do you know what I mean? So that you're not just looking at faces, but you are contributing, you are silently reflecting and recording, but you could do it in the chat and you could in answer to the shared question.
I think it's important actually that it is just for yourself and silent. If people are uncomfortable just seeing each other's faces, you can get everyone to turn off their cameras. It doesn't have to be that you can see each other, but I think it's just for yourself at that first point. It's not that you don't see anyone else's ideas, you're just thinking about what's in your mind about the answer to the question. And the first time that you hear someone else's thoughts on the question is when you go into your breakout rooms in pairs. And in your pairs is where you start to hear other people's ideas, and you kind of combine the two and build on what you thought yourself. And it could be just a couple of minutes, you could give people longer, depending on how complicated the question is. So that's the 2 of the 1, 2. The next bit is the 4. So you've had individual, you're in a pair, and then your pair gets matched up with another pair. So you combine the groups. And at this point, you start to kind of notice similarities and differences between ideas as you share them, because, people have taken their thinking in different directions, and there's a lot of creativity in, building on ideas that are formed in different ways and people that have different perspectives on it. You need at least 4 minutes for the great breakout rooms of 4. The kind of rough rule of thumb is a minute for yourself, 2 minutes in a group of 2, 4 minutes in a group of 4 as a minimum. But of course, when it's virtual, people sometimes use a little bit longer in breakout rooms, as we discussed. It might be that you increase the time in the group of 2 and then again in the group of 4. And the other important thing is that you keep people in the pairs they were originally. So you don't just randomly put people in groups of 4. You can move people as a pair into a room with another pair. And that's something you can do on the breakout room function, is transfer people between rooms. You can move a pair into another room that way. And then after that point, you bring everyone back into the main room. So they've all had a chance to think what they think, to combine their ideas with another person, and to spot the similarities and differences that people have thought. And then you bring people back together and ask them what idea stood out in your conversation, or kind of what was your most interesting thinking. So you're not asking people for everything that happened, but just the most important idea, and then making sure that people don't repeat them, because otherwise, death by feedback, you just get an endless talking without it being particularly productive. And at this point, another thing you could do is use a tool like Jamboard that we talked about in our first session, to kind of capture ideas all at once and have lots of post-it notes if you want lots of ideas. But if you want just a few ideas, if you want the groups of 4 to have really thought about what's most important, then it's kind of helpful to get people to take it in turns and to get views from the room in that way. So we're not going to try that one out, but that's hopefully, by doing it step by step, that's a helpful way to explain it. And I'll send around the link to the Liberating Structures afterwards, and you'll also have the slides so you can kind of look over it again. The final one we're going to talk about is World Cafe. And so this is useful for networking or discussions in large groups. And you might have been at events in the past with kind of circular tables around the room where you all move around and each one's kind of a station with a different discussion happening on it. And on Zoom, it's possible to do the same thing. You just need to kind of think about how you plan it in different ways. And so I think there are 2 potentially useful uses for this. One is networking. So you might have a large event where you want people to learn about different projects or different ideas or different questions, and you can have someone from each project or community group as a presenter or facilitator. And so instead of just someone talking from the front for a really long time, or lots of different people talking from the front, you can have people in smaller breakout rooms with a bit of time to learn about something and then a bit of time to discuss or ask questions. So the group itself, obviously the smaller the better, because then the better quality of discussion you have. But I think you could have up to 12 people and then a presenter, and still have a much better quality discussion and Q&A and reflection on the presentation afterwards. And then to kind of do that World Cafe thing of moving people around the room, you on your breakout rooms can just move the presenter between rooms and the group stays the same. So then in quite a short space of time, you could have the whole room hear from lots of different projects, have a chance to discuss them, and then you can bring everyone back together. There's a question, how do you move people between rooms? So again, this is something I'll make sure we send a really clear explainer video, because we can't show you on the screen what we're doing. But when you do breakout rooms, you can just click on a person and there's an option to move to, and you can pick any of the other breakout rooms. So as long as you remember where they've already been, you can move, and you know what the name of your presenters are. You could even get them to put in their Zoom name, presenter 1, presenter 2, so that it's really clear who you're doing, and then you can just move them around the different rooms. And the added slightly more complicated option is either you can get people to choose in advance which conversations they're interested in, or there's an option for people to choose their own breakout rooms. And that might cause chaos. It might be that some rooms are empty and some are full, but it's known as like the law of 2 feet, that people can move around and go where they're interested rather than being forced to be somewhere they don't want to be. So if you've got a more tech savvy or people that are more comfortable with Zoom in your event, it could be that you try something a bit more complicated about how to assign people rather than them just being in a breakout room. And then the other way you could do this is, instead of having presenter move around, you have a facilitator move around. And the way I've seen this work really well is in community conversations. So for example, up in Morecambe Bay, they've trained all of their staff in this thing called the art of conversation. And they host community conversations where they have people sat together with a question, for example, like, what's great about living around here? And you discuss that on your table in a group. And then the facilitator moves to another table, and that group builds on the questions. They see what's come before and they kind of add to it, or they disagree with it, and it kind of increases it makes it more engaging, and it adds to the conversation by kind of adding, layers and more creativity to it. So that's the other way to do this. Instead of a presenter, you're moving around, you're moving a facilitator around. So that was a very quick whistle-stop tour of 3 ways that you can use breakout rooms for 3 different kind of methods. There's kind of really simple ones you could kind of throw into any session, or more complicated ones that you might design a whole event around if it felt like that's what the group needed or the kind of purpose that you're trying to meet. So Hayley, do you want to stop sharing screens so we can all see each other? And I'd love to hear either questions. So I guess 2 types of questions. One would be about the facilitation method itself. If it's about how to do Zoom rooms, like the mechanics of it, I'll gather those, and what I'll do is I'll send round videos or accessible kind of blogs about it afterwards, rather than try and explain it here where I can't kind of show you. But it'd be useful to know if there's anything in particular it'd be helpful to share afterwards. And then I'd also just love to hear if anyone thinks there's a way this could be useful in sessions that you run, whether it's the thinking pairs, 1, 2, 4 all, or the World Cafe, if any of those feel like they could be something that you want to go away and use, and how you might do that. So yeah, over to you. Has anyone got any thoughts, questions? Julie?
I'm just curious about recording. Are breakout rooms recorded in the same way as this is recorded?
No, so breakout rooms aren't recorded, and the chat isn't saved from them. So in fact, what we're going to do next week is different ways that if you want to capture what people say in breakout rooms, there's some different methods of how you can do that. But Zoom itself isn't helpful for that, basically.
I went to an event yesterday where they did record the breakout room as well.
Did you have to click on it when you went into your breakout room? How did they do that?
I don't know. There was quite a lot. I think about 50 people at that meeting, and the breakout room I was in, there was recording. The recording button was on there as well, so they managed to do it somehow.
In that case, ignore me, and I will find out how you do that and send it around after.
I just think as well, it's useful if the participants know if something's being recorded or not, and the same with the chat about, if those comments are captured, if you like.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, the meeting I went to did make it clear that they were recording us. Even when we joined the breakout room, they said we are going to record the breakout rooms as well, so we were aware of it before they press record.
Yeah, you can see how there's different types of sessions that would be helpful for, or really unhelpful for. Like, so for now, this is a training session that then people can watch in their own time. Whereas if it's a discussion where you want people to feel safe, to say what they really think and feel, or to say something that might sound stupid, or to like start by having lots of ideas before they figure out what they really think, then recording that probably isn't very helpful, or would shut things down a bit.
Is there any way of the host sharing their screen to the individual breakout rooms, or the co-host?
No, it has to be someone in the breakout room to share screen.
How does that work? So say, for example, if you were using one of the previous tools that we've looked at, like Miro or what have you, if you were using that in a breakout room, could you make sure that the presenters or facilitators had the link and then they'd have to share that link within the breakout room, or how would that work?
Exactly. So you could either have a facilitator in each breakout room who could then share their screen with the Miro board, and you could have, or you could give everyone a link to, say, a Jamboard before they leave, and then they've got that open already, and then they can use it in the breakout room. And then next week, there's also ways that you can use things like Google Docs and Google Slides to kind of have everyone in the breakout room be able to capture their ideas, and then you can kind of see them develop and then come back to the main room and they're all in one place. And that's what we'll be talking about next week. There's a little promo for that. Jackie.
Yeah, hi. I'm just thinking this through at the minute. So there's the usual meetings and things where I can see where this would work, and I'm just trying to think with a smaller, the chat. I put it in the thing like a chat and brew group for older people, where we're all learning Zoom and that. But sometimes the chat flows and sometimes it doesn't, and somebody dominates, somebody doesn't. But I don't want it to. I don't want it to seem too set up, if you like. But it could be quite an interesting tool. I mean, people might have had experience of this, using it with, you know, members of their groups, their voluntary groups, and so on.
I'd be interested to hear other people's experience. So I also help run the Greater Manchester Co-Production Network, and we're trying to figure out how to do a kind of networking session. And it's similar to you that you can't have a good conversation with this many people. And so things we've tried are, at the end of one of our events, we've said, let's, you know, one of the magic of events is we get to stand around and have a cup of coffee with someone and meet someone you've never met before, and we can't have that on Zoom. So we tried to say, if you want to chat about something you're working at the moment you're proud of, go to this room. Or if you just want to have a conversation over a brew, this one. It never quite worked. No one ever quite wanted to nominate them for that. But I wonder if putting a bit more structure in, you could do some kind of like almost speed dating, friend making version where you put people in smaller rooms and switch it around every so often. But I think that's the thing about Zoom, or virtual meetings, is it takes away the kind of possibility to be a bit more spontaneous. You kind of either need to go full on, here's a bit of structure we're going to use, or not. You can't really have halfway in between where you just sat around a table and see what happens and go with what the room needs from you. Karen, you just put something in the chat. Are you happy to share that with everyone? Because that sounds really interesting.
Hi, I was just saying on a meeting last week, I experienced something called what they called a fishbowl, and I thought that was really good. I quite enjoyed that because it was inclusive. You didn't get the death by feedback that could have happened. What they did was, I think there was probably about 30 people on the call, but they chose a number of people, let's say 4, and everybody else turned the mics and cameras off, and then those 4 people were asked to discuss whatever the topic was for probably about 2 or 3 minutes, or maybe longer in some cases. But then when people came back into the room, there was the opportunity for everybody to feed in, if you like, not just in the chat. And I actually found that to be quite an inclusive, without it going, you know, as a free-for-all or chaos. The people who were on mute and off camera, if you like, were listening, making the notes, and I thought that was really good. Actually, it was probably nearer to a humane contact thing than some of these others that I've experienced, not only here but in other places.
Brilliant. Anyone else got anything they'd like to ask or share that they've seen or tried out? Oh, Deborah, yes, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I wondered if there was any kind of randomizing facility, you know, that would that could rapidly, you know, like a couple of minutes in each breakout room. Is there anything that could be set up to create a sort of speed dating type event. I don't want to go speed dating, but you know, that kind of moving on to the next person.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can definitely choose how many people in a room and just randomly send people out to however many breakout rooms that is, or you can manually assign and then just move people yourself between them.
I went to a meeting a while ago now, and similar to this speed dating thing where you mentioned before, Maddie, where different topics so you can choose from. So rather than assigning people randomly, they put the links for the different breakout rooms on the chat box with an explanation of what each breakout room was. Then people could pick, they would click on the chat box which breakout room they wanted to go to, and they were taking that. So I've not seen that before since. That's the only time I've seen it happen, where actually the links are on the chat box for each breakout room, and you pick which one you want to go to. So that's another thing you can use, I guess, to encourage people to pick where they want to go to have conversations with people, especially if you want to class it with different topics.
No, definitely. So yeah, so that's a relatively new Zoom feature that you can let people choose their breakout rooms. So you can actually kind of name what the different rooms are, and then people can decide what interests them rather than just sending them somewhere. I will make sure we send around something about that as well. Any more questions or things that will be useful to share afterwards?
Maddie, I just wanted to share that we've actually got a session coming up in a couple of weeks, well, 4 weeks time on the 24th of March for a basic introduction to Zoom, and they'll be going through how to use breakout rooms. So anybody that wants more information on how to use the rooms can always register for that session. It's not on the website at the moment, but it will be by the end of today.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Kaylin. Cool. But if no one else has any last things I'd like to say, then just say thank you from me and Hayley to all of you for coming, and I hope it was useful. And yeah, please get in touch after if you've got anything else that you'd like us to cover in these sessions or any questions. It's lovely to see you all.
Thank you for joining.